Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for How to Comply with Form I-9 Requirements, presented by I-9 Advantage and our presenters, Dave Basham and Sathab Abo. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you that this webinar has been pre-approved for IHR certification credits, 1 HRCI Webcast recertification credit, and 1 HRCI e-learning credit. Please be sure to attend the complete webcast to receive your credits. If you're joining us live today, you'll receive an email from hr.com within 1 to 2 business days that will include your certification credit information. You can also log in to hr.com and go to your My Certifications page where you can see the credits that you've received and also find out about our recertification program and e-learning webcast pass. If you have any questions today for our presenters, then or for hr.com, then please type them into the questions panel that you'll find up at the top right-hand corner of your screen, little orange button, click that, and we will be sure to follow up with you. And it's now my pleasure to turn you over to our presenters.
Thank you, Sylvie. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today as we discuss how to comply with Form I-9 requirements. A couple of housekeeping matters, as Sylvie mentioned. First off, you will receive a copy of the presentation at the completion of the webcast. Secondly, please take a moment to submit your questions during the course of the webcast, and we will be certain to answer them at the end of the presentation. If we're unable to answer your questions due to time constraints, we will follow up with you at the completion of the presentation within the next few days. So I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself as well as my co-presenter. My name is Sathab Abo. I am a Corporate Immigration Counsel and Senior Product Director at I-9 Advantage. I have extensive experience in immigration law, both employment-based and family-based immigration law. And I have the privilege of interfacing and facilitating with experts, with USCIS experts, REVERIFY experts, and other Department of Homeland Security analysts and policy experts, such as Dave Basham, whom I will introduce in a moment. So I frequently deliver webinars and live presentations on Form I-9 matters. I welcome you all to ask your questions. We're looking forward to a great webinar today, and we hope that we are able to answer any questions that you may have during the presentation and ease your concerns about the process surrounding Forms I-9 and E-Verify. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my co-presenter. Dave Basham has been with the Department of Homeland Security for over 7 years as a senior analyst. He conducts briefings on Form I-9 and E-Verify. Dave also serves as a U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service point of contact for ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, more specifically the Worksite Enforcement Unit. USCIS is the government agency, as you all know, that oversees lawful immigration to the United States. USCIS secures America's promise as a nation of immigrants by providing accurate and useful information to customers, granting immigration and citizenship benefits, and promoting an awareness and understanding of citizenship. It also works to ensure the integrity of the immigration system. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over the control to Dave and allow him to begin the presentation.
Hey, thanks a lot, and a quick shout out to I-9 Advantage. We do some presentations with them several throughout the year, and we rotate those presentations between the I-9 and E-Verify. I-9 obviously is a hot topic, and especially right now, let me go ahead and touch on this right off the bat. When's that I-9 going to expire, Dave? It shows that it's expiring on the 31st of March. What do we do? Number one, here's several options for you. Stay in touch with I-9 Advantage that can provide you that information. You'll be able to see toward the end of our presentation today where we have a resource page. Specifically, you might want to jot this down, we have a website just for the I-9. It's called I-9 Central. We have that website on that resource page for you. Or Google's a great thing, isn't it? You can simply Google I-9 Central and go right there. That way you can keep up with what do I do when March 31st comes up. We might put out an item that says, Hey, continue to use that form even past the expiration until we give you additional guidance. We may put a new form out, but you're not going to know unless you go ahead and attend or view some of our USCIS sites. As you heard, I am a subject matter expert speaker on the I-9 and E-Verify for the USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. Specifically, our division is the Verification Division, which is the home to the I-9 and E-Verify. We make up the forms, the manuals, the programs. We maintain the customer care office, the status verification offices, all kinds of items. So I'm literally setting in our division here today. Here's our agenda, as you can see, realizing there's always a different level of knowledge and understanding or use with the E-Verify. We always like just to touch on the background. Then we're going to jump into completing the form. I'm going to go block by block, and a lot of my talking points come from the myriad or the most common questions, and some of them advanced from the public, to include those questions that are called into our customer care center or those that I receive via the webinars or live presentations I get. We'll then jump into some storage and retention. We'll wind down with some resources, and then we're going to jump into some questions and answers. So remember to go ahead and send in those cues into the chat feature. As you see here, a background in short, yep, the I-9 was born in 1986. Specifically, you need to had to complete an I-9 in anyone that you hired after November 6, 1986. So if you've had an individual that's been working for you continuously since '83, if you will, you wouldn't have to worry about having an I-9 on them. Why? In layman's terms, they're grandfathered in. You can see how the I-9 came about in an effort to control that illegal immigration. Congress passed. And you see that last paragraph there. Those provisions and sanctions of IRCA are found in Section 274 of the INA. Our handbook in regards to, and we title it, Guidance to Completing the Form I-9 for Employers. We also title that, we assign a number to it. Many of you may know that as the M274. See if we're going forward here. Well, there we go. Okay, here's individuals who can legally work in the U.S. 4 groups, and the second group there's non-citizen nationals of the United States. Those are individuals such as from America, Samoa, and Swan Islands. So to comply with those employment eligibility verifications of the INA, first, you need to verify the identity and employment authorization. That's the purpose of the I-9. Look at that second item there in the middle, complete. Complete retain the I-9 for those hired after November 6, 1986. You'll hear me reiterate that statement several times throughout today's presentation. Why? Because I have individuals that have been working with the I-9 for years still come up to me after presentations and go, Dave, I thought we could shred the I-9s after 3 years. Okay, we'll talk about retention. How long do you retain that I-9 here in just a second, okay? So preventing discrimination. Here's 4 types of unlawful conduct, whether it be actual or perceived. And who enforces those anti-discrimination provisions of the INA? It's the Office of Special Counsel. I'll refer to them as OSC. They're within the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. You see that number toward the bottom? I know you don't have the slide deck yet, but you might want to write the page down or jot that number down real quick, 1-800-255-8155. We work with the Office of Special Counsel, OSC, on many sessions. Number 1, we conduct a public webinar on employee rights in regards to the I-9 E-Verify once a month, and we host that along with OSC. Additionally, when we're going to many sessions, live association presentations, such as we'll be at the American Payroll Association speaking, the SHRM conference speaking nationally, they're sitting right beside us and they make a presentation on those discriminatory acts that some employers may be conducting in regards to how they provide guidance or complete or conduct the completion of the I-9 and or E-Verify. Why do we show you this slide in this particular number? That is their help number, if you will, customer service number. If you feel heading into today's session or after today's session, I wonder if some of our policies, whether they be verbal or written, might fall in that gray area of discrimination. You might want to pick up the phone, call the Office of Special Counsel. As you can see here on the slide, it's an anonymous call. They have their attorneys and their investigators that rotate on that helpline. When they pick up the phone, they don't want to know your name, your NAICS code, your company, any of that information. They simply ask them the question and they'll assist you. As I speak with many other attorneys throughout the country, they're always asking, Dave, are y'all pushing our customer care line number? Because they'd rather help you on the front side than to meet you in the courtroom. You're sitting at one table and they're sitting at the table with your employee. Utilize our services. Okay, so before we jump into each block on the I-9, let's go over a couple items. We just talked about, hey, what do we do with the I-9? It's expiring here at the end of March. So remember, keep up with I-9 Central. Also, you can go to, and you'll see our resource tab toward the end as well, where you could go onto our E-Verify website. You can go down on the left-hand side to publications. When you click on publications, click on newsletters. We put out every, I'd say 4 to 7 weeks, what's a one-page newsletter. It's called E-Verify Connection. And it's literally just one side of a page. It's not the front and back. And all we put on it is the latest and greatest information, the updates, if you will, on anything relating to the I-9 E-Verify. That's another great resource. If you subscribe to that, when we put it out, we'll email that to you. You don't have to worry about getting a lot of other junk mail, etc. Okay, so you have I-9 Central and the E-Verify Connection. So the current version of the I-9, here's the 2 pages that you fill out pen to paper if you're still filling out pen to paper. But how many pages are there to the I-9 if you print it off? You know, there's actually 9 pages. There's 6 pages of instructions. Pages 7 and 8 are what you see here before you. Page 9 is the list of acceptable documents. You should be providing that set of 9 pages to your hire to complete when they go through the process of completing the I-9. Yes, all 9 pages. Now don't fret. Go, is Dave crazy? I'm going to run off 9 pages every time? Well, what's to say that once you have one of your new hires complete the I-9, after they're done, you simply ask them, hey, do you want to keep these first 6 pages, the instructions, and that page 9, the list of instructions, the list of acceptable documents? I'm confident the majority of them won't. I know there's always that one. But for those that don't, why don't you just pull them back and then marry it up with the current version of the I-9 for your next employee to complete, okay? But you should be providing them all 9 pages. What do you need to file away? The only thing you need to file away is what you see here on the screen before you. That's that portion where you're filling out. Although when you print it off, it's 2 separate pages, there's nothing to say that you can't print it off onto one sheet of paper front to back. Okay, let's continue on. Just a couple soft reminders. Remember, you need to have that I-9 on file for all those employees that you hired after November 6th. The only exception are those hired on November 6th or later. Look at that last sentence and let's talk about that for a second. You can delegate the authority to complete the I-9 to a responsible agent. However, and here's your key words, you will retain liability for any errors. Who are we talking about there? Many of you may have what's known as remote hires. If you're not familiar with that term, let's say, and I'm just using this as an example, that Rhonda is in, let's say, Chicago. And she hires me to be her firm's product manager on the East Coast, and I live in Virginia, calls me and offers me up a position, and I accept the position over the phone, but she says, Dave, we're not going to fly you up here to Chicago. We're going to send your onboarding packet to you to complete. And maybe one of those forms within that packet's the I-9. Rhonda can send me to anyone she would like to complete Section 2 on her firm's behalf. It could be a friend, a family member. She could send me to an attorney, to a librarian to a notary, anyone. But that individual then would be her responsible agent. They're going to complete Section 2 on her behalf. But be very careful with using responsible agents, because remember, that last portion of that sentence, you retain the liability for any errors that they conduct while completing that I-9. Now, we do not, I'm always asked, hey, Dave, does USCIS provide a list of, these responsible agents around the country that we can select? No, we don't. You can use whomever you want. But once again, I caution you to ensure any of the responsible agents that you're using, that they certainly understand everything about the I-9, because they're acting as your agent, if you will. You're not required to complete an I-9 for these individuals. See on the screen before you. And that second group, the independent contractors, hey, we're not just talking about a construction company that comes and building an addition onto your firm or whatnot. Many companies, especially in, I know here in Washington, D.C., they hire contractors. I liken them to, and bear with me, a 1099 employee. Now, the payroll community is very quick to say, hey, Dave, those are 1099 vendors, but I think you know what I'm talking about. Those 1099 employees. Now, I'm not telling you 100% of the time you will not be required to complete an I-9 on those 1099 contractors, because it really gets down to your HR directors, your legal counsel, really discussing what is the true relationship between your firm and that individual, okay? And you see the last comment there. Anytime I use, you don't have to complete an I-9 for those employees that are working outside the United States. Anytime I use the term today, United States, we're not only talking about the 50 United States, as the note says down below, but here in Washington, D.C., Guam, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, and the CNMI. They were also known as the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands. They were federalized back in 2009, and they use our I-9 as well, and they're located very close to Guam. Okay, here's page 9. When you run off the I-9, here's the list of acceptable documents. You should be simply showing an individual, when it comes to completing Section 2, showing them this list and simply making a statement as follows. Hey, I need you to provide one document from List A, or a combination of one from List B and one from List C. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard, and realizing that hires, they're not familiar with the I-9. Now they're filling out this form. Now you show them these list of documents and they're looking at them. How many of you have heard go, well, what does everybody else provide? Or, what do you want to see? You better not answer that. If you answer what document, or you guide them what documents that you would like them to see, hey, that Office of Special Counsel would consider that as document discrimination. So simply say, I can't really answer that, but you can select any document. Once again, one from List A or a combination of B and C. Now, I keep reiterating one from A or a combination B and C. Why? I still have employers that come up going, oh, Dave, I thought it was just any one column. Or, oh, Dave, I thought they could pick any two columns. I didn't know it was just B and C. I thought they could say an A and B or C and A. The one I liked the best is when I was doing a presentation about a year ago down south, and the young lady came up to me afterwards and said, well, Dave, we make them give one document out of each column. That one really caught my attention to the point where I need to ask her a follow-up question. I said, well, what do you do if they can't provide one from each column? Well, we let them go. And so we had a little discussion there, but I think you see where I'm going. One from List A, coupled from 1B and 1C. Let's jump into, maybe we've got a delay there. Let's see. Let's jump into, hey, the green card and the signature. You may see some permanent resident cards. Yep, we're back to calling them the green card. Where you see where we have that arrow there below the picture, you may run across some permanent resident cards that are valid. They're good cards. If there's not a signature, it's simply written or typed in, signature waived. Yes, we're issuing some of those cards. So if you see that, don't let the red flag go up, go, oh, that's a fraudulent card, and throw it back at them. Be aware of this. Additionally, you'll see that customer care number that I'll provide you on the resource page toward the end, where you can call our customer care line number, talk to a live representative on any question on the I-9. I got a generic question. I got a question on how to complete. Hey, I got this document before me right here, etc. Call and talk to a live rep Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. your time zone. Why do I say your time zone? Our call centers are located in Buffalo, New York, Washington, D.C., Lincoln, Nebraska, and Los Angeles. So be aware that you may see some of those green cards, permanent resident cards, that come out that say signature waived. All right, let's go into each block of completing the I-9. Hey, the I-9, I told you, where you're putting pen to paper, is 2 pages. Page 1 makes up section 1. Within section 1, there's 3 subsections. Here on the screen before you is the employee information subsection. It's to be completed by the employee. The next screen I'm going to show you is the next subsection, which is the employee attestation. That's completed by the employee. That's it. Those 2 subsections are the only subsections that are completed by the employee. What is your responsibility as the employer? Simply to ensure that the employee completely and correctly fills out those subsections. That's it. You're not validating any information there in section 1. i.e., example, if they elect to put their social security number here in section 1, which by the way is an optional field, caveat, unless you're enrolled in E-Verify. But if they elect and they write their social security number in there, you can't, when they get done and hand that back, you can't say, hey, I need to see your social security card so I can validate that that's the number. You're not validating information in section 1. Where you're validating information from documents is based on the documents they provide you in section 2. Now, it's generally here in a live session, I'll have a bunch of hands throw up, especially when I'm giving a payroll group, to include HR group. Hey, Dave, we need their social security number for payroll purposes too. So when they put that number there, that's why we want to see the social security card. I understand the need for the social security card for other things outside of the I-9. But don't mix those needs or responsibilities with the policies and procedures of the I-9. Okay, so let's talk about each line here. You see there's the last name, first name, middle initial, other names used, if any. Other names of used, if any, is an optional field. Look at the second line, address. Look what we have in those parentheses. Street number and name. Yes, no P.O. boxes, street number and name. I still have parts of the country go, Dave, we only have P.O. boxes. We don't have street number and names. Yeah. If they don't know their street number and name, they can go to the police department, sheriff department, post office, or the fire station to find that out. Just a second, excuse me. So no P.O. boxes. I've been asked this question probably about 10 times over the past 2 or 3 months, so I feel compelled to relay this information. I've had employers go, Dave, we hire some individuals that are homeless. What do they put in the address block? Our I-9 central site, in our FAQs, we have a section there, and we address that issue. And it states as long as they can explain where they're residing that day, that's good to go. I'm not making light, I'll use this as an example. There might be an individual that's living underneath the bridge of I-95 and Main Street in Richmond, Virginia. They might be living behind Earl's Hardware Store on Cherry Street. It's the location, the street address, name of where they're residing that day. That includes if an individual says, you hired them, they're completing this, and they go to put their address, and they look back and say, hey, I'm moving next week. Do you mean go ahead and just put that address? No, it's their address that day. If they move next week, they don't need to come back and update that address. What is their address that day? You'll see the apartment number, applicable, city or town, state, zip code. Look at the third line, date of birth. Look in the paragraph, in the parentheses there. Look at the format, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, 4-digit year. Every one of your new hires puts it in that format, don't they? I'm sure if everybody wasn't on listen-only mode, I'd hear a bunch of laughter there. But don't fret if they don't put it in that format, because I-9 Central, once again, states as long as that date they put in that block is easily recognizable, you're good to go. Social Security number field. Hey, in regards, in comparison to previous versions for the Social Security number field was just one big block. On this version, we put it as 9 individual blocks. Why? Because we're having employers calling, hey, USCIS, what do? I've got employees that are putting just 6 digits in the Social Security field. So we figured on this version, we'll fix that. We put 9 blocks there. Remember, it's an optional field, unless you're enrolled in E-Verify, and as is outlined in the Memorandum of Understanding, when you enroll in E-Verify, it tells you, because you're enrolled in E-Verify, they have to put their Social Security number there. Why? Because that's one of the data fields you're going to enter into E-Verify. Email address and telephone number. Yep, those are 2 new blocks that have never been on any of the previous versions of the I-9. They're optional fields. They don't have to put anything in either one. They can put one or the other. It's their option. Why did we add them? Most common question I receive. Well, let's say that I was hired today and they want me to start work today. Let's say it's Rhonda's company. Remember, Rhonda's in Chicago, and let's say I live in the Chicago area, and the day I show up and I start working for pay, they have me fill out all kinds of paperwork and briefings, and after I get done with today and completing the I-9, I'm going to be the project manager for one of their big projects 3 hours away, and I'm going to be there every day. I'm not coming back into the office. I complete the I-9 today. I walk out of the office, and maybe tomorrow Rhonda and her staff is going to do a Q&A, quality assurance check on that I-9 before they file it away. If they have any questions, they need to reach out to me. If I placed my email address and or telephone number, it's just another means for Rhonda and her staff to connect with me. Now, we'll tell you, for those of you that are enrolled in E-Verify, if an individual places their email address there in that block, that you must enter that into E-Verify. Okay? So let's continue on. Now, before we continue on, let me address this one issue. Dave, what do we put in, or what do we tell employees if they don't put anything in those optional blocks like other names use? Do they put a line through it? Do they put NA? Whatnot? You know, that's one question I never answer. Never, whether it be on a webinar or a live session. Why? I want you, the employer, to run off those instructions, run off those 9 pages. Gather everybody around a table that's got their hands in the I-9 process within your firm, as much as possible. Look specifically at those first 2 pages, have a yellow highlighter. I can tell you you're going to highlight about 5 or 6 areas. As you read each block in the instructions, you're going to see about 5 or 6 areas, once again, where it says that you may put in A or you can put in A. Highlight those for those specific blocks. There's one block in section 2 where it says if there's nothing put in there, you must put in A. Remember, section 2 is your responsibility as the employer. So I want you to go ahead and just run those off, highlight that, review that with everyone, okay? Let's look at that employee attestation section, which is also the employee's responsibility. You'll see the 2 areas we really want to discuss right here. Hey, they attest to one of the 4 categories. What happens if they check off more than one category? And trust me, they do. Speaking with my sister agency, ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, it's our sister agency, ICE, that does the audits. I talk to the auditors many a times, and I always get a chuckle when they say individuals check off 3 of these blocks. Hey, I'm a citizen of the United States. I'm a non-citizen. I'm a lawful permanent resident. They can only check off 1. So if your responsibility is to ensure that the employee completely and correctly fills it out, and they check off more than 1 and they hand it back to you, what do? You hand it back to them and you tell them, hey, you can only attest to 1 of those blocks. We'll talk about corrections here in just a second. You see that 3D barcode off to the right? Don't worry about it. You're going to see it on the 2nd page as well. You might say, what do you mean don't worry about it, Dave? Well, then why did y'all put it on the form? And that's a great question. I asked the same thing. Somebody in the food chain in USCIS way above me knows somewhere down the road we want to use that 3D barcode box, but you don't have to worry about it right now. Then you see the area where the employee signs and the date. Look at the last sentence on this slide. all employees must complete Section 1 no later than the first business day they start working for pay. I know several of you may be saying, hold on, Dave, I thought we had 3 days to complete the I-9. Hey, we'll talk about Section 2 in a second, but we're talking about Section 1. The employee needs to complete that employee information, that previous page I just showed you, in this section, the attestation, no later than the first day they start working for pay. But let me ask you this, when's the earliest an I-9 can be completed on an employee? The earliest. Many employers say, well, Dave, that's easy. That's the first day they show up for pay. When the actual answer is, once you offered them a position and they accepted the job, anytime from that date, but no later than the first day they start working for pay, you can complete the I-9 with them. I know that's a mouthful. Let me give you an example. Rhonda offered me a position on 15 February, called me up, Dave, we want you to be our sales rep. And I accepted the job, but she said, Dave, for payroll purposes, we're not going to have you start working for pay until 1 March. I go, okay. Let's say here on the 25th, and for this scenario, an example, let's say I live in the Chicago area, and I bounce into Rhonda's office just to do a meet and greet. And while I'm in there, Rhonda says, hey, Dave, how would you like to fill out some of your new hire paperwork? I go, sure. Can we complete the I-9 today? Remember, I'm not going to start working for pay till the 1st of March. Yes, we can. Why? I was offered and accepted the job back on the 15th. Okay? We'll talk about Section 2 here in a second. Let's look at the last section on that first page, the Preparer Translator Certification. What is it? What's pretty much defined in the title. If you help an individual prepare that area above, maybe I was playing basketball with my granddaughter last night, hurt my wrist, really hurts to write. Walk into Rhonda's office today, we're filling out some paperwork, and I tell Rhonda, hey, it really hurts to write. If I tell you what to put there in that I-9, those blocks, will you write that for me? She can do that. Yeah, but she needs to fill out this Preparer Translator Certification block. And obviously the second part of that, Translator Certification. If an individual has to translate to that higher in this I-9, they need to fill this block out as well. The employee does not fill out this block, okay? It's either the preparer that assists that individual or the translator. Now, a common question I receive is, Dave, can an individual be the preparer or translator and also be the individual that completes Section 2? Yes, they can. Let's go into page 2. You see page 2 makes up Section 2 and Section 3. Look at the highlight area right up top. When this version of the I-9 came out in draft, it's about 4 or 5 months before it actually went live. The verification division I work with right here is about 600 people, and they pulled about 6 of us in the room. And seeing I'm one of their speakers, I was one of the 6, and they showed us this, what at that time was the draft I-9, and had us discuss that, make some comments with them. And I asked myself, where do I think, as a speaker on the I-9, that the public's going to make the most mistakes on this new version of the I-9? And this is just Dave speaking here, no USCIS data or anything. I felt it's right up top here where we have it highlighted. I felt that employers are going to forget to write the employee's last name, first name, middle initial. Why? Because you've never had to do it before. So don't skip over that. You'll see there's our list A, B, and C blocks still. What's different in those blocks on this version versus the previous version under list A, we only had 2 blocks. Now we add a 3rd block. Why? For those of you that may be working with colleges, universities, institutions of higher learning, if you will. You're familiar with the CVIS number. That's where an individual from another country comes into our country and goes to school. There may be a combination of 3 separate documents for them that make up a list A. In the previous version, we only had 2 blocks, so employers were having to make an ad hoc 3rd block, if you will, in certain circumstances. So we added that 3rd block. The most common question I receive on those blocks is the second line on each block, issuing authority. Dave, can we use abbreviations there? Well, let me tell you, the Washington, D.C. generic answer. You can never go wrong if you spell it totally out. But I'm a realist as well. In the context of the HR community or payroll community, which is what I have found, either HR or payroll individuals or the individuals that are generally tasked with the I-9 process, if in that context of a new hire and you're completing the I-9, if you want to put SSA or SSN, wouldn't it be fair to say we would all know that's Social Security Administration or Social Security number, right? Using that abbreviation, I think you're safe. But if you're going to use abbreviation for something else that, although it may be very common in your industry, in your state, in your part of the country, but not everywhere else, be very careful about using that abbreviation. One such example here in Virginia where we get our driver's license is the Division of Motor Vehicles. We call it the DMV. And you know there's a handful, maybe 2 handfuls, of states that also it's called the DMV, but you know it's not at every state. So be very careful just writing, hey, DMV for the driver's license number or whatnot. You see that 3D barcode again, don't worry about it. And you see that oval area toward the bottom, that's where you're going to put the date they start working for pay. Yes, you can put a future date there. I gave you that example a while ago. Rhonda called and offered me a position on 15 February, said I'm not going to start working until 1 March. Bounce into our office today. Maybe I completed section 1. I dated it today, the 25th of February. Here, maybe Rhonda completes section 2. I show her the documents I have. Maybe I have a mommy today, and I provide her some documents. She completes section 2. She dates it that she saw those documents today. But in this oval area right here, that's where she'd put that date. I'm going to start working for pay, 1 March. Again, you can put a future date there. Now, I'm generally asked a follow-up question. Dave, what happens if you're sick on 1 March? You can't go to work. You go to the doc, and the doc says, hey, I don't want you to go to work until the 3rd or so. What does Rhonda do with that date? She can make a correction. She can line through that date, make the correction off the side. We'll talk about that in a second. Look at the comments over on the left-hand side. Remember, Section 2 and Section 3 is completed by the employer. Section 2 must be completed no later than 3 business days after the employee begins working for pay. Section 1 needs to be completed that day they start working for pay by the employee. But you, the employer, have up to 3 business days after they started working for pay to get those documents from that individual, and you complete and sign Section 2. Now, let's talk about the 3 business days because that still asks some questions from the public. If I started for work on Monday, what day of that week does the I-9 need to be complete to be compliant? Many employers go, well, Dave, you said 3 business days. That's easy. You started work on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. When the actual answer is Thursday. Why? Look back at that sentence there on the left-hand side. Must be completed no later than 3 business days after. 3 business days after I started working for pay, after Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's your business days. Let's say your firm's only open Monday through Friday and you're closed on Saturday and Sunday. If I started working for pay on a Thursday, when does that I-9 need to be complete? What day? That would be Friday, Monday, Tuesday, your business days. And as you see on the left-hand side, the documents that are shown you must be original documents. The only document that can be a copy is a certified copy of a birth certificate, and the documents must be unexpired. Hey, we don't expect you to be a document expert, but if the documents look genuine and relate to the individual, you must accept that document. Period. If any of you go, hold on, Dave, it's not my first rodeo. I've attended some advanced document fraud classes. Our policy goes up and beyond to say, et cetera, et cetera. Remember that Office Special Counsel number I showed? If I were you, I'd pick up the phone and run it by him. Because the M274, and you see, it's in all cap letters. You must accept the document if it looks genuine and relates to the individual. You see at the bottom of the slide, again, the documents must be original. The only one that can be a copy is a certified copy of a birth certificate. Hey, a receipt rule. Some of you may accept a receipt. Some of you may have dealt with that. Some of you may not. Let's talk about it for a second. Receipts. Look at the first sentence. May be used as, here's your key words, temporary proof of employment eligibility when a lost A, B, or C or document has been lost, stolen, or damaged. That means they had the document. It had already been issued to them. But somewhere along the line, maybe it got lost. Real example, 2 years ago here in Virginia, I lost my driver's license. I had to go in the DMV, filled out the form, paid the $20. Young lady ran me off a receipt and said, Mr. Basham, until we mail you your driver's license to your house, here's a receipt for your driver's license. I could have bounced out the DMV that day, went across the street, maybe a restaurant was hired me right on the spot, wanted me to start working right away. I went and completed the I-9 with them that day. I could have provided a receipt if I wanted to show my driver's license as a List B document. And then I show them a List C document. They would have to accept that receipt, but remember, it's temporary proof. As you see on the slide, make sure that the document is issued by the originating agency. If you see somebody's providing you a receipt for a driver's license, and up top it says from the Department of Defense or from Walmart, well, we might have a problem, Houston, right? Now, 90 days from the date they started working for pay, remember that receipt is just temp proof. They need to show you that actual document. In this example I gave you, I would have to show my employer my actual driver's license. If I can't show it, our legal counsel says that you can terminate them. And you see at the bottom, a receipt where an individual has applied for the initial EAD card or the renewal of an expiring EAD card. You can't accept a receipt for that, nor can you accept receipts when employment's going to last less than 3 business days. Copying documents. You can either read this slide or remember this. You make a copy of everybody's documents or you don't make any copies at all. It's one or the other. Where do you keep those copies? That's your business. We recommend you put the copies with the I-9 wherever you file them. One or the other. Section 3, verification. Then we'll run into some resources and wind down. When do you use Section 3? Now don't get wrapped with this section because we also have a chart on the next page. I'll show you. But you use Section 3 when you re-verify an employee using this section if their temporary employment authorization is expired. Maybe at the time you hired them, they showed you an EAD card. It wasn't expired at the time you hired them. But here it is. Now it's about to come up to expire. That's one of the documents that you have to re-verify. It's this section you can do that with. You can also complete Section 3 if you rehire an employee within 3 years. We'll talk about that in a second. And also if you want to update the biographical information of an employee. If an employee gets married and changes their name, maybe divorce changes their name, or just otherwise changes their name, yes, you can use Section 3 to update the biographical, their name change. You don't have to, you may. But remember this word, uniformity in completing the I-9. If you do that for one individual using Section 3, you better do it for everyone that changes their name. I told you we'd provide you a chart, what documents and when to re-verify. Look at there. Don't re-verify those documents to the right. Passport, passport card, permanent resident card, List B documents. When they expire, no, you do not re-verify those. You see there are 2 exceptions to the permanent resident card, and those you usually re-verify. Utilize that chart. Additionally, if you still have questions, call our customer care line number. So correcting mistakes and missing forms. How do you correct a mistake? Yes, you can correct a mistake. You would simply line through the item that needs to be corrected off to the side, make the correction initial and date. No strikeovers. Watch this, Rhonda. We'll turn that 4 into a 7, to a 7, to a 7. And you never use whiteout on an I-9. Now, who should make corrections in Section 1? Excuse me. Who did I tell you complete Section 1? The employee. You want the employee to make any corrections in Section 1. Why? If their employment eligibility gets called into question, that I-9's put before them, etc., and they go, hey, I didn't make those changes, the employee should make corrections in Section 1. Missing forms. What happens if you're missing an I-9? What do you do? Rhonda started a company in this scenario 4 years ago. She had 10 employees. Here it is 4 years later, she has the same 10 employees working for her. She's doing an audit on her I-9s today. She realizes she's missing one. Maybe it's on me. What does she do? She calls me in today. Hey, Dave, can't find your I-9. Need you to fill it out. So I fill out Section 1 right then and there, assign and date it. She then has 3 days to get those documents from me, right? But let's say she shows me that list today and I have the documents on me and I provide them. Rhonda fills out Section 2. When she dates it, the day she says she saw those documents, she dates it today as well. You see, she's not having me, or nor is she backdating that date. But you remember that block there in Section 2, she certifies the date I'm going to begin working for pay. It's there she's going to put that real date of 4 years ago. Now you might say, Dave, That's crazy. She gets an audit. It's going to show that you started work 4 years ago, and you and her filled out the I-9 dated today. That's more than 3 days after you started working for pay. She's going to get her hand slapped on an audit. You're exactly right. But it's not going to be as painful as if she backdates, has me and her in Section 2, backdate those dates so they all line up. She gets caught. Remember, these auditors, they do this for a living. They know all the tricks to the trade. And in this example I gave you, would be a very easy one for them to catch. Why? Because this version of the I-9 wasn't even in existence 4 years ago. Storage and retention. Real quick. You must have an I-9 on file for everyone. Okay? For all those current employees. The only exception, those that were hired November 6, 86 or before. Store the I-9s and documents together. Ensure that only access, the correct access to those I-9s are available to individuals. If you get a request for an I-9 inspection, you got to provide them within 3 days. How long do you retain that I-9 after they've left? Look up top. 3 years after the date you hired them, or 1 year after the date they terminate, whichever is latter. I know that's a mouthful. Look at the example below. John was hired on November 1st, 93, and in July 5th, 94, you fired him. So you pull out that I-9 and look there in Section 2, what date did they start working for pay? November 1st, 93, add 3 years to that date, put that date off to the side. Then you fired them on July 5th, 94, add 1 year to that date, put that date off to the side. Which of those two dates are latter in this example? November 1st. That's how long you retain the I-9. Where do you retain it? Anywhere you want. A retention file or in the full of your regular I-9s. What do you do with that I-9 after that retention date? M274 doesn't tell you that. All it says, you need to retain it up to that date. Let me take my official hat off. Why would you want to keep it? Let me put it back on. Keep the I-9 up to that retention date. I'm trying to go for it. All right, let's wind down with some resources, and we'll go in to some other items and wind down with some Q&As. In regards to resources, I talked about I-9 Central. Here's the site. It's available in English and Spanish. Check it out. On our I-9 Central site, we have some multimedia resources. We like to call them vignettes. I'm an old country boy from West Virginia. I like to call them lunch bag sessions, 2-3 minute clips. You click on that section vignette, it's like a 2-3 minute clip on how to fill that. What did Dave say about completing Section 3? Click on it. We also have I-9 webinar on demand. It's about a 22-23 minute webinar that you can click and listen to any portion of it that you would like. Trying to go forward here, Rhonda, maybe you can, I don't know why. There we go. Hey, I'm with Outreach. We'll go there. See that customer service slide right there? See the employer hotline number? 888-464-4218. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. There's our email addresses, and you can visit us. The slide right before that I went through. I'm just part of an outreach group. I'm a speaker that works directly in this division. If you would like us to speak, you could reach out and talk to us. We don't do any charging for that. And ladies and gentlemen, simply a disclaimer slide that should be coming up, that simply this is meant as an instructional and informational section. No way we could cover everything. So I hope you enjoyed that. With that, I'm going to turn it back over for some base information. We'll wind down with some Q&As.
Thank you, Dave. That was fantastic information. I know that we are limited on time, so I'd like to briefly discuss some electronic I-9 solutions and resources and then move on to your important Q&A. So as Dave suggested, I-9 Advantage is a corporation that offers Form I-9 and E-Verify solutions. Our solutions are continuously evolving to meet the needs of our clients and our partners, and we offer these easy-to-use, flexible, and truly compliant solutions that mirror federal regulations and stay up to date, and also ensure that the Form I-9 and E-Verify are compliant at all times. We offer some innovative solutions that can be presented in 3 different packages. One would be our I-9 Advantage, our I-9 Medic, which digitally converts and corrects paper I-9s, and then most importantly, as we're seeing with current trends, is mobile-enabled remote hiring solutions as well. So our solutions are innovative. They offer walk-up usability. They eliminate the risk of government fines and provide precise data validation and error checking. There's increased efficiency as it relates to the usage of our electronic I-9 solutions. We also seamlessly integrate with your existing HR platforms. And for many of our E-Verify clients, we offer, of course, easy E-Verify submissions with customized option for each user. So I would like to briefly share, of course, some information regarding the restoration of your and the health of your existing I-9s. This relates to audits and the corrections of your current paper forms I-9, as many people have not yet converted to electronic solutions. The restoration and the health of your forms I-9 can be done easily, quickly, by self-correcting these archived forms I-9. They eliminate the risk of human error and the preparation time for an audit from weeks to minutes, of course. And then, of course, they compliantly correct these error-ridden I-9s by precisely catching the errors, followed by step-by-step correction guidance for the user, who then has authority to make those corrections. So I'd like to go on now and answer any questions. I will submit these questions to Dave. Dave, we have a few moments to share some of the questions that the audience has submitted. They are fantastic. Unfortunately, we won't be able to respond to all of your questions, but as we mentioned early on in the webcast, we would be happy to later on submit the answers to your detailed questions. Dave, if you have a moment, I'm going to review some of these questions and share them with you. Some of them were answered during the course of the webcast, of course, so I'd like to focus on those that were not elaborated at great length. And oftentimes we find that some of our clients and our webinar attendees have really sophisticated questions. And to that end, one of the questions, Dave, is, what are the rules on scanning forms I-9 instead of keeping paper copies? What are the rules on scanning instead of keeping paper copies?
Yeah, and that's a great question. You can, and let's talk about documents first, and I want to talk about scanning as well. Remember, when an individual shows documents, you have to hold and see the documents. No Skyping of documents, okay? Let's cover that one. Number two, if you want to, once you're shown the document, you feel the original document, and you want to make a copy, and you want to scan that for your file, as long as you're scanning your copy and everybody's documents, you're good to go. But remember, you can't have documents scanned or copied, excuse me, and then you take a look at that copy or that scanned copy for purposes of completing the I-9. I hope that answers that question. We can move on.
Sure. Who can make corrections to both Section 2 and the certification section? Does it have to be the person who filled out those sections?
No, it does not. That's a great question. Let's say that Rhonda completed Section 2 for the company for 3 or 4 years. She's been promoted on. Now I'm in that position. Maybe I'm going back and I'm doing an audit on the I-9s, and I see 1 or 2 items that need to be correct. I can make those corrections. Anybody in the company can make those corrections. Okay.
Right.
But remember what I said about Section 1. Only the employee should be making corrections to Section 1. Okay.
Right. Thank you, Dave. Next question, if a Social Security card has copy written across it, presumably stamped with the term copy, can we still use it as a valid List C document?
Well, you can't accept any copies of any documents, okay? So remember that, number one. So the documents have to be original. Additionally, sometimes, and we added on the list of acceptable documents, under List C number 1 for the Social Security on this version of the I-9, we listed, instead of just saying a Social Security account card number, now we put those additional items that many times that you see from a Social Security card. Hey, you can't accept it unless it has, you can't accept it for work authorization, or you can only accept it with other DHS authorizations, except like that. So take a look at those. If you see a Social Security card that has something written on it and you don't understand if you can accept it, should you, shouldn't you, remember, not only can you go to our website, but if you need an answer quick, pick up the phone and call our customer care number, okay? Or you can always reach out back to I-9 Advantage as well, okay? Back to you.
Great advice. Thank you, Dave. Here's an E-Verify question for those of our clients and webinar attendees that are E-Verify employers. We have multiple organizations within 2 locations, one in Milwaukee and one in Phoenix. Arizona is an E-Verify state, but Wisconsin is not. If we hire an employee in our Wisconsin office that is working out of a Phoenix-based employer, do we need to E-Verify that employee in Wisconsin?
That's a great question, but unfortunately I can't answer that. Why? Because I cannot speak to each state's legislation that they enacted in regards to mandated use of E-Verify. So in that case, what you're basically saying is that employee has their feet in Arizona and working there for your Wisconsin office. So what you have to do is you really have to look up the legislation that Arizona has passed and read their legislation in regards to employers and employees of E-Verify. But we do not, at the federal level and on our site, break down each state's legislation by any means, okay?
Sure. Sure. Okay. Dave, when completing I-9s with MRIVs, which is a machine-readable immigrant visa, do I need to include the foreign part of the foreign passport?
You know, what I always tell everyone is when you're completing the items, and that's why we go right back to the instructions, okay? Take a look at the instruction portion, look in the M274 for that particular item. If you go, I don't know if I should be adding some additional items, pick up the phone and call our customer care line number and see exactly, hey, what do I do with this particular document in regards to that? Now, in regards to that specific document, so Bob, if you could assist me there, I'm having a little brain cramp, and I don't like to answer those unless I'm 110%.
Yeah, I would like to provide an example. I can submit some examples of the proper completion of the Form I-9 as it relates to that, because the MRIV acts as a temporary, in some cases, an I-551.
There.
So it acts as a receipt, which in fact would have to be, if I'm not mistaken, later updated. But I do have some examples of that, and I would be happy to send that out to the individual that posed this question. You know, specifically the foreign passport of the MRIV.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very
and
good.
There is actually a very specific instruction in the M274 and an example of an MRIV, and the instructions, the policy as to how you're supposed to complete that. But I will certainly get back to that individual. Thanks, Dave. Another question. I think we can take one last question before we wrap up. And the question is, let's see here. If a notary completes the I-9 form for you, do they have to stamp the I-9 form? If not, how do we know an actual notary completed the form?
Great question. And it's with that in mind, here I just started within the past week conducting a session a month for the National Notary Association. Remember, when an individual is completing, such as a notary, is completing an I-9 on behalf of the company, they're simply your authorized representative. They're not completing the I-9 in the title or in the capacity of a notary, okay? So when they complete Section 2 and they sign and date it, when they're typing in, or excuse me, when they're filling out, you know, what's their name, the company's address, etc., and their title, they don't put notary. They don't put, oh, I'm the bank manager. They put authorized representative. and that's
Right.
it. Okay, and because they're not in complete net capacity, obviously they wouldn't put their stamp on there.
Right. They are acting in the capacity of a standard authorized agent, not specifically a notary. Correct. Right. I think those are all the questions that we are able to answer given the time frame. And Dave, I thank you so much for your knowledge and your insight as it relates to the Form I-9 and E-Verify. It's been very helpful, and I'm certain that our guests are equally appreciative. And we look forward to upcoming and additional webinars that we can co-host, and often even provide more specific information. But as we mentioned, we will certainly provide you with a PDF version of this presentation, and we will follow up with answers to your insightful questions as well.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me.
My pleasure.
And on behalf of HR.com, I'd like to thank both Dave and Satab for the very informative webcast today, and I-9 Advantage for sponsoring this. A lot of great questions, so thank you to the audience as well for your participation and your enthusiasm in learning. Just a reminder to your attendees who attended the live webcast, you'll receive an email from